Hey team, so today we're going to talk about how to determine good technique versus bad technique when it comes to movement. This can be working out, yoga, Pilates, kettlebells, mace bells, Pilates. I'm not sure if I said Pilates, but if I said it twice, it's because you should be doing it twice as much. So you have to be able to determine what is good and what is bad. And we are going to borrow from the world of art and use an analogy that I think will help clarify how to make this type of discernment. Because obviously, as you know, there are innumerable ways or methods of working out. There's so many tools, so many different styles, so many different techniques, everything from like animal flow to Olympic lifting and everything in between. So there's much more of an array to choose from now. And as such, you have to be able to have a mental framing for you to be able to gain insight into what the ideal should be, particularly if you're training by yourself. So hopefully this will help that, and we're going to talk about art, and we're going to use it as an analogy. So let's talk about two types of art. And the first one is going to be the one that we're going to eliminate off the bat. And the second one is the one we're going to use as our mental scaffolding for what good movement is. So in art, let's say that you have a version of art. It's abstract art. And abstract art can be completely subjective, meaning that it cannot have, or it doesn't necessarily have to have a literal representation of anything. If you've ever seen a Jackson Pollock painting, you'll know what I mean. And if you don't know who Jackson Pollock is, allow me, pardon the pun, to paint you a picture. So he would, as an artist, and what he was made famous for, place a canvas on the floor, and then he would dip his paintbrush in paint, and he would stand over the canvas and just drizzle, yeah, that's right, drizzle the paint over the canvas. And for some people, when they see this drizzling and spattering of paint, it evokes an emotion out of them, right? It's like there's an emotional response of whatever it is that he was trying to communicate through that style of painting. For other people, they just see an incoherent mess. However, in that case, it's entirely subjective. Let's take another example, right? Because let's take another example where the abstract art form can also cross over into a more physical realm, something like contemporary dance. So in contemporary dance, you might go to this piece, you'll sit down, and all of a sudden the dancers rush out onto stage. They're all wearing black. You can't really see their bodies. Maybe it's like very flowy black robes, and all of a sudden the music starts and it's very jarring, and they start dancing. It's very jerky. It doesn't match the music. The dancing is very, very chaotic. It's not flowy. It doesn't make sense. But perhaps the choreographer had a vision of chaos and uncomfortability, and that's what they wanted to evoke out of the audience. However, it is subjective, because if somebody from a more traditional background in dance went to go see that, they might not enjoy that. So that is the abstract version of art that we are going to not use for our mental blueprint of what makes good movement. And I'm not saying it's bad, it's just subjective. Now, on the other end of the spectrum, you have what would be considered more objective art. So for example, if you had an heirloom, say you had a wooden chair as an heirloom in your family, and you hired an artist, they could paint that chair, and they could do it so poorly that you would have no idea what it is. They could draw it with, like, 6 legs, maybe the wrong color, maybe it's upside down, it's floating in the air, and you would be upset, right? On the other hand, you could also find an artist who could not only paint the chair, but they could make it and do it in such a way that they magnify the beauty of it. You'll see all the details, maybe like the chips in the chair, maybe the color is a little bit off, and they'll capture all of that. And artists that are so good at this that objectively they can take a figure, an object, a person, and sketch it so well that you would look at the representation that they've created on the canvas and you might think it's a photograph. Like, that's how close to reality it is. So that is a more objective type of art. You can mess that up. Like, you have to represent it correctly with certain lines, with certain shading, with certain depth to it for it to come out as, or to come across as real. In dance, if you take classical ballet, for example, that is based a lot of those styles of dance are based on time-honored traditional methods passed down from generation to generation, to where that when you go to a ballet piece, if you were to see a foot that was doing this, like all crooked and pointed when they have their leg out, it would make you feel uncomfortable. So you can represent that incorrectly. However, if you have a dancer and if you had a magic remote like they do in those wonderful sci-fi movies, and you were able to pause a performance of a ballet piece, and all of a sudden you would probably see clear lines of action. You would see feet pointed, you would see arms extended, you would see spines elevated. And in fact, some dancers are so fantastic at this that they can jump in the air and hit these positions perfectly. They can also do this spinning on one foot, whereas an untrained dancer would not be able to do that. Right? They would not be able to achieve that level of what is considered ideal in an objective representation of this style of dance, which you could almost think of as sacred geometry. So that has the categories we're talking about. You have the abstract, and then you have the objective. The objective has lines of energy, lines of action. You have almost like a geometrical approach to the representation. That is what you want to think of when you think of movement. So when you're working out, you want to focus on your lines of action, your purposeful lines of energy. Whether that be if you're working with tools, if you're working with mace bells, kettlebells, barbells. If you were to film yourself, if you're by yourself and you put the camera to the side and you were to pause, say you're doing something as simple as a lunge, you should be able to tell where your lines are, your spine, your arms, your legs, where your hips are placed. And you want to think about it in this way of it being lines of energy, of action, specific tension, and that way it'll at least put you on the right path. And one way to quickly identify whether or not you implicitly kind of like when people move this way is just go to the gym and look around. And I would guarantee that the people that you think are like going full out beast mode and doing all this are the people who have an understanding of their body in this framing, not in the framing of effort, because effort can be very deceptive. It's if you think your effort is going to do something for your technique, it won't. It's not going to do anything for your technique unless you can take your effort and make it focused on your breath and your awareness, and then take that and put it onto the lines you're creating, or the purposeful tension, or the energy you're creating. So I hope that gives you a little bit of insight into whether or not you know if you are on the right track towards ideal technique. So you have the abstract, which is what you don't want. Not saying it's bad, but it is subjective. You want to lean more into the objective and lean more into the literal representation and lean more into the idea of this geometry that you can create with the body, whether it be with yoga. Yoga is a perfect example. You can just look at it and kind of understand what I'm talking about. But it's in everything. It's in kettlebells, it's in bodyweight drills, it's in animal flow, it's in anything that you can think of. So that is kind of how you discern good technique from bad technique. So good technique will have all those things we chatted about in both the objective art and the objective styles of dancing, and bad technique will be, abstract. It won't have any foundation. Having said that, later on you can start to blur the lines a little bit, but in the beginning I would not do that. So hope that helps, and chat soon. Bye.